If you're watching this video, odds are pretty good that you think Fallout is pretty great, and I couldn't agree more. I love Fallout in pretty much all its forms, from Tim Kane's original, if dated, masterpiece that spawned the franchise, to the dull gray rubble and somewhat shallow writing of Fallout 3, to the vibrant, if sometimes controversial, world of the Fallout Amazon web series. I love pretty much all things Fallout, but sadly my love does not come without the occasional, we'll call them misunderstandings. I've said some things, terrible things that aren't entirely accurate. Now, normally on this most unholy of days, unscrupulous YouTubers might seize the opportunity to have a little bit of fun at your expense, lure you in with clickbait, post wild out-of-character content. Hell, I've even done that in the past, or at least I've started scripts for it that I never got around to writing. In any event, I've decided to embrace April Fool's Day by instead highlighting some things that I've gotten wrong about Fallout, either by trusting the wrong storytellers around the campfire, hacking the wrong terminal, or just completely misremembering some of the things that I've encountered. It's not like I haven't been playing Fallout games for 14 years or anything. Some things just aren't always that fresh in my mind. But that's why I'm here to eat a healthy dose of humble pie and set the record straight on some of the things that I've gotten wrong about Fallout games. Now, it would be a boring and out of context mess if I just showed a quick cut compilation of me saying stuff that was wrong, so this will be a little bit more of a where I said it, what I said, and why it was wrong type of video. Also, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but it is the stuff that still gnaws at me from time to time. And just in case it needs to be said, spoilers for pretty much all games in the TV series, you've been warned. I might as well just start with the freshest defenses. In my recent video ranking all of the permanent settlements in Fallout 4, there were a lot of you forgots in the comments. Some are pretty well warranted, some were just nitpicking, some were just wrong, but one that came up a few times that was absolutely on me was my omission of water pumping from my ranking of Far Harbor. I mentioned that I couldn't find any evidence of water pumping or desalinization happening in Far Harbor. For the purpose of assigning points as part of a semi-objective-ish scoring system that I was using for all settlements, I was so focused on finding water within the boundaries of Far Harbor, which was a standard that I held all towns and settlements to BT-dub, that I completely forgot that in order to collect fresh water, harbormen have to travel down a dangerous route with fog condensers to reach a small pond filled with antifreeze radiation barrels and other rather toxic substances that plays home to a purifier operation. So for the sake of completeness, yes, Far Harbor indeed does have a water source, but for the sake of my rankings of Far Harbor, the source lies far outside the defined boundaries of the settlement and is dangerous and still a bit iffy on if I personally would still consider it clean. Now, this isn't just a one-off incident where I had decided that I was just going to intentionally score Far Harbor differently. I also didn't count the cooking station sitting right outside the entrance to Vault 81 because it doesn't actually reside inside that settlement. So it should come as no surprise that I wouldn't count the pond all the way on the other side of Old Bar Harbor either. It doesn't really change the way that the rankings would have come out, but it should have definitely been included for the sake of attention to detail. Sadly, this wasn't the only water-related oversight. It turns out that there were two. One I was called out on, and one I discovered in editing that's been eating away at me. See, this isn't just me dealing with beef in the comments. As it turns out, Acadia does have a drinking fountain, which would bring its ranking up half a point as it does create enough water for the sole survivor, but all rankings would still stay in the same order. I also only counted one water pump and drinking fountain in Bunker Hill, but in fact there was a second water pump hiding behind one of the shacks. Now, depending on whether the settlement was empty or not and what the actual water consumption of a Brahmin is, this might actually start to approach the amount of water necessary to give Bunker Hill the full point for water instead of the half point for the sole survivor, but honestly, they are still the bottom of the barrel settlement there. I did neglect to include the crater of Adam, mostly just because I've never really considered it a town. There certainly is a large congregation forming, and they actually have about the same number of people as the base population of Bunker Hill. So by Commonwealth standards, they do kind of have the numbers to call themselves a town if they wished. But this area is so hostile, and there's virtually nothing in the way of any of the systems that I was ranking, so there wouldn't have been much point in including it. Unless you're Rad King, then it would be 10 out of 10. So this one is probably the most wrong about anything that I've ever been in one of my videos. In my 5 easy ways to fix the Brotherhood of Steel video, I was detailing technology and research found in the Institute that a true Brotherhood of Steel elder would be willing to preserve and protect rather than summarily destroy, as is Arthur Maxon's MO. Key among these is the grand spanking new nuclear reactor that runs the Institute. However, my reasoning was it was a lot flawed, because I stated that the Prydwen ran on fossil fuel and that the Institute's reactor would make a significant upgrade to the Prydwen and allow for longer distance journey. For instance, traveling to Southern California. That's a whole other can of worms, but whatever, I'm over it. But the problem is that I was just very wrong in this assessment, because the Prydwen in fact does not run on fossil fuel, but rather the Prydwen utilizes a nuclear reactor, quote-unquote salvaged, from an unnamed aircraft carrier found in the capital Wasteland. Naturally, the obvious implication is that this is the reactor belonging to Rivet City, which carries with it a number of other humanitarian concerns, but that's a topic for a different day. But what would possibly caused me to think that this was not the case? Well, I was misremembering a terminal entry I found on the Prydwen that I had read several years prior during one of my last BOS playthroughs that stated that the Prydwen was basically stuck in place at the Boston airport because the journey from the capital Wasteland to the Commonwealth had consumed every ounce of coolant that they could carry. In my addled mind, the fog of memory buried beneath 6 college degrees worth of studying that I'm definitely putting to good use talking about a decade-old video game on YouTube. Pull up, Gray, you're in a nosedive. Well, anyway, I had somehow equated consumed coolant with consumed fuel. It doesn't make my statement any less wrong, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it. It also doesn't really change my assertions in that video that a brand new reactor salvaged from the Institute would make a far better energy source for the Prydwen than a 210-plus-year-old fission reactor that apparently leaks coolant like a sieve, especially when that reactor can barely carry the Prydwen 400 miles when somehow a decade later they needed it to carry them 2,500 miles. Again, topic for another day. So statement equals very wrong, argument equals still mostly valid. A while back, I did a review on the Mothership Zeta DLC, and apparently, and by apparently I mean very obviously, kept making references to the capital Wasteland, which makes sense. I'm talking about an expansion to Fallout 3, except I didn't call it the capital Wasteland. On multiple occasions, I kinda, sorta, might have called it the wrong. Gray, you want to run that by us again? I may have called it Commonwealth. I think they didn't get that. Can you speak up? The Commonwealth, okay? I kept calling the capital Wasteland the Commonwealth. Are you happy? Dude, there's no one else here. It's just you and a microphone. You need help. In one of my earlier long-form videos, I took a stab at giving an overview of every plant and fungus encountered in Fallout 4, and personally, I felt like I pretty much nailed it. Throughout the video, I looked at all of the plants, where they grow, their general utility and crafted items, and tried to make an educated guess on what pre-war species may have served as their progenitors. For the most part, I feel like I did a pretty decent job of researching and putting my own meager botanical and horticultural knowledge to good use. But a possible failing of mine was the fact that when referencing the Fallout Wiki, I specifically only referenced the Fallout 4 wiki when making sure that there was no information that I was missing. I mean, after all, it was a video on the flora and fungi of Fallout 4. Why would I read wikis for other Fallout games? Seems that there probably was a valid reason to do so, because Fallout 76, which uses pretty much all of Fallout 4's resources, including the plants, also includes a nifty poster object. This poster, which depicts many plants found in-game, also includes Latin taxonomic names. These names would seem to contradict a few of my hypotheses, such as bloodleaf possibly mutating from the Virginia waterleaf, or mutefruit descending either from a blackberry or a plum, because the poster included in Fallout 76 would suggest that bloodleaf is a form of water lily and mutefruit is an apple. Now, I'm fairly open-minded to the fact that there could be plants out there that I haven't considered as a possible forebearer to these plants found in-game. There are millions of species out there, and I certainly don't know all or even most of them. But I would be a bit leery about taking at face value the scientific classification of plants that were scrawled on a poster nearly 2 centuries prior to the events of Fallout 4, hundreds of miles away from the Commonwealth, and were scribbled by a post-apocalyptic self-appointed scientist without any form of peer review. But that's just me, I'm an academic snob. Does that mean that random dude on the internet knows better? Not really, but as I stated, I was forming hypotheses based mostly on just the in-game information found in Fallout 4. Now, one plant that I'm pretty sure that I did get wrong was the fever blossom found in the Bradburton Wastes. At the time of making that video, I believed that it was likely a heavily mutated wild rose, as they would be very prevalent throughout the US and are extremely hardy as they can become invasive species in certain areas. However, I now believe that there is a better candidate for the ancestor to the fever blossom, and that is the passiflora, otherwise known as passion flower. Fever blossom, passion flower, come on, how did I not connect those dots? One probable reason, other than the fact that I'm just not all that familiar with them, is the fact that they tend to grow in tropical environments, and Massachusetts is not that way. Still, the flower's appearance is a lot closer, though the fever blossom plant itself still bears a stronger resemblance to a rose in my opinion, but we're talking about a world in which thistles mutated a time-delayed explosion of radioactive dust as a defense mechanism. A flower growing thorns isn't exactly out there. A rose would make more sense just based on the fact that it would have been located in that region already, but the flower and psychotropic qualities would seem to suggest that life, found a way, and that passiflora is just a better culprit overall. One last teensy-weensy thing I was wrong about was when I discussed the tapped white pine trees on the island, which I assumed were probably some sort of spruce. I think now that they're just white pines. And I stated that historically, maple trees were the only trees that were tapped. Now, this was wrong for a couple of reasons. The first is that I didn't specify that these trees are being tapped for food. Pine trees have been tapped for centuries so that their sap could be used as waterproofing and preservative for wooden ships and boats, so it was wrong for that reason. But the second is that even if I had specified that this was for food, I would have still been wrong, because apparently people tap box elder trees to make syrup much like they would with maple trees. Now, I've personally never ever heard of people eating box elder syrup on their pancakes, but that's what Google says, so yeah, I learned something new in the process. Okay, here's one that goes all the way back to the earliest days of Grey Gaming. In my Settlement Builds for Noobs episode covering my walkthrough of the castle, I may have Grey, you've used this bit already, just sack up and get it over with. Dude, uncool. Anyway, keep in mind that this was when I was still just rambling into a $20 microphone as I walked around my settlements and shook my mouse at anything that caught my fancy. There was no scripting, very little editing. I had just started playing with console commands, but Rad King hadn't told me why that footage still sucked yet. I was still publishing in 720p because that was the highest fidelity I could publish without having to pay to upgrade my editing software. Those were the dark ages of Grey Gaming. Anyway, I was working on a railroad playthrough at the time, so when I was talking about needing to have completely unlocked all areas of the castle in order to construct a similar build, I sort of just blurted out that you needed to unlock it via the railroad questline rather than the Minutemen questline. It's sort of a nothing error, it's pretty much been forgotten by everyone, but not me. I'm American through and through. I never forget. My mistakes anyway, if this video has proven anything, it's that I actually forget a lot of stuff. Lots and lots of stuff. Anyway, I hope you found this video fun, and hopefully this fresh take on the April Fool's Day formula, where I actually point out the times where I've been the fool, catches on. And I'm sure you'll leave no shortage of incidents I've left out of this video in the comments so that I can just come back here next year and fill out a script for a part 2 of this nightmare. But while you're doing that, I wanted to take a moment to salute my patrons that are still making this slew of mistakes possible. Special thanks to my officer tier patron Carver050, and continued thanks to all my non-coms who keep the grunts on point. Patreon funds go directly toward improving the production quality of Grey Gaming. From guitar capos to a new computer tower I'm slowly piecing together, every patron pulls their weight and makes things better for the rest of you ungrateful. Until my next salute, stand at ease. Have a blessed day, stay safe, and I hope to see you here next time on Grey Gaming.